All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, I want to send all of you thank you. And we really mean this. Thank you for your tremendous support. People are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which we speak. But we do this because we love it, as we are sharing our passion with you all as we continue to build our listening army to take over the world. We definitely want to continue on with our Chin Check Radio Top 10 Boxing Upsets of All Time list. As you see, we are at number 5. And folks, putting this list together has been extremely fun, and we hope that you are enjoying the journey with us. Now, even on this fight that you see on your screen between Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield is in our top 5. Amongst boxing fans, this actually gets underrated and overlooked when you think of great boxing upsets, whether they're heavyweight championship history or flat out boxing history. And we'll get to some of those reasons why later on. Now, let's set the tail of the tape. Oh, let me give you a brief history. For those of you who don't know, and you should know the story of Mike Tyson, but this is what we do here at Chin Check Radio. We educate the ones who don't know. Mike Tyson, being the youngest heavyweight champion of all time at the age of 20, won the WBC championship by knocking out Trevor Burbeck in 1986. Mike Tyson, he eventually unifies all the titles, fights Buster Douglas in 1990, and suffers a shocking loss to one James Buster Douglas. Evander Holyfield, after winning a bronze in the 1984 Olympics, fought at cruiserweight. He won the Cruiserweight Championship in only his 12th professional fight in a classic fight versus Dwight Muhammad Qawi. So now Holyfield, after achieving everything that he achieved in the Cruiserweight division, set his sights on the Heavyweight division. Now, what a lot of people don't know, and please look this up, there was talks of Tyson and Holyfield fighting before the Buster Douglas fight. Remember, the Buster Douglas fight was just a little keep busy fight for Iron Mike until negotiations can get going for a potential fight with Evander Holyfield. Holyfield was actually in attendance that night in Tokyo when Douglas upset Tyson. So now when Douglas beats Tyson, Douglas shows up totally out of shape, gets knocked out by Holyfield in the 3rd round. Now Holyfield, even though he just beat the man who beat Mike Tyson, is now the undisputed and the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, never really got the credit that he deserved. Because people said that Douglas was fat and out of shape. People said that even though Mike scored a knockdown against Buster Douglas and Holyfield knocked out Buster Douglas, they said that Mike Tyson had hit him harder. So Holyfield never got the credit for that. And people felt it was a fluke. So, with Holyfield, it just was one of those, he was really holding on to a title that still really belonged to Mike Tyson in the eyes of boxing fans, where folks felt it was just a matter of time before Mike got his belt back. Well, that was supposed to be settled on November 18th, 1991. But unfortunately, a rib injury to Tyson and Tyson's subsequent conviction for rape charges pretty much flushed that fight down the toilet. So now Mike is hauled off to prison. Evander Holyfield now embarks on his classic trilogy with Riddick Bowe and fights with Michael Moore. As Mike Tyson gets out of prison, he fights on his campaign, regaining versions of the heavyweight championship of the world. And now the stage is set for November 9th, 1996 at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Mike Tyson coming into the ring with a 45-1 record with 39 knockouts, and Evander Holyfield bringing in a 32-3 record with 23 KOs. Now, if you look at both men as he walk into the ring, Evander Holyfield, as you hear the gospel music playing in the background, you know, he's singing, he's singing to himself. Okay, you Holyfield, who's very religious. He always credits God and Jesus in his performances. As he makes his way to the ring, one can make arguments, probably looking like a lamb being led to slaughter. As Mike Tyson storms to the ring, he has a brothers from around the block, all of them rocking pinstripe suits with Godfather hats, chanting Allah Akbar, because at that time, Tyson was a practicing Muslim who converted during his incarceration. So now you have two fighters, two different styles, two different religions, two different dispositions. Everything could not be more different for these great fighters. As the first bell rings, you see Mike Tyson come charging across the ring, lands a hard right hand right to the chin of Evander Holyfield. Straight hard right hand. You see, it got Holyfield's attention, and I'm not going to say that Holyfield was hurt, but I'm going to say he was definitely buzzed. So clearly that set the stage of what Mike Tyson wanted to do. Holyfield recovers like he usually does, and now starts to fight Mike Tyson back. So after pretty much getting hit with one of Mike Tyson's best punches, he then responds to hit Mike back, landing left hooks on the inside, landing right hooks on the inside, tying Mike Tyson up, like actually fighting Mike back. At the end of the first round, you saw Mike land a punch right as the bell was ringing, and you see Holyfield land a punch right behind that. So clearly Holyfield was not afraid of Mike. He was not going to be overwhelmed by Mike Tyson. And you heard his trainer, Don Turner, telling Holyfield in the corner, "You're the bully in here. He's not the bully." And now, in the second, third, and fourth round, the strategy that you see playing out is Evander Holyfield hitting Mike from the outside. As Mike is coming in, he's hitting Mike as he's coming in, catching Mike with short hooks on the inside, few body shots on the inside, tying Mike up, because again, for Mike Tyson to do his damage, to really get the leverage in order to unleash his power, he has to get up close, because again, he had a shorter reach by 6 inches. He has to bend his knee, because remember, Mike has to bend his knees in order to really generate the power on his uppercuts, and especially on the inside fighting. So Holyfield, what he was doing, as soon as Mike got in, tying Mike Tyson up, walking him back, where again, Mike is unable to generate power based on his leverage. And you see the same strategy playing out in the second, third, and fourth round. At one point, and I'm going to say it was the second round, as Holyfield spins out of way, as he spins out of danger, has Mike pinned against the ropes, starts landing some clean shots that you really weren't used to seeing Mike Tyson being hit clean like that, because Tyson, even though for all of his power, was also known as a very good defensive fighter. So you see the same strategy playing out in the second, third, and fourth round. In the fifth round, I think that Mike Tyson senses that, wait a minute, I need to turn the tide here. I have to seize the momentum. And Mike then starts landing some hard punches. The first combination he landed was a beautiful right hand to the body, followed by a left hook upstairs. And you saw it back Holyfield off and got Holyfield's respect. And then Tyson rips a beautiful old school combination punch where he rips a right hand to the body. He bends those knees and fires an uppercut straight up the middle. And now Mike has now seized the initiative, landing hard uppercuts on the inside. You see Holyfield's energy level start to wane. He doesn't have the same offensive output. So now you start to think to yourself, has Mike really turned the tide in his favor? Is he now starting to wear Holyfield out? Because again, those punches got through. It got Holyfield's attention. And this is really the first round that you can give Mike Tyson, that you can conclusively give him the fifth round. Even the first round, even though he came up and landed some hard punches, yes, he might have landed the harder punch or punches, but Holyfield actually dictated more of the action. So you can give Mike Tyson the first round or score the first round even, but you have to give the second, third, and fourth round to Evander Holyfield. Now you give him the fifth round to Mike Tyson. As a sixth round, there's an accidental clash of heads. Mike seems to be more worried about the clash of heads than actually the guy that's punching him. Now, at this point, Evander Holyfield is catching Mike as he's coming in, because one of the weaknesses of Mike Tyson, when he did come charging at his opponent, he did leave himself open. So if you're able to catch him coming in, it actually worked for you. And it's something that Holyfield's team of trainers, Tommy Brooks and Don Turner, told him. If you catch him coming in, the fight's yours. So Holyfield started to do that after Mike became flustered about the headbutt. So during the 6th round, with the off-balance shot that was followed by a punch, Evander Holyfield scores a knockdown of Mike Tyson. So of course, the arena just erupts, and again, you have Evander Holyfield scoring a knockdown of Mike Tyson. Nobody's expecting this. So Mike gets up. So now you have Mike down 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, and now just got a knockdown in the 6th round. In the 7th round, it's still more the same. Now, even though the action is starting to slow, but the action still favors Holyfield as he's still employing the tactics of hitting Mike as he's coming in. If Mike did get in, throw his punches, his short hooks on the inside, tie Mike Tyson up, walk him back, again, because he's making Mike Tyson reset offensively by trying to get leverage to generate his tremendous punching power. And he fought a smart fight. Tied Mike up, walk him back, or if he did not walk Mike back, push him back in the center of the ring. Again, Mike has to get reset. As Mike goes to charge in, as Mike goes to open up, Holyfield is catching him again. Same strategy playing out. So this is the same thing that played out in the 7th and the 8th round. In the 8th round, the fight doctor, Freddie Pacheco, I think had brutally honest commentary about the state of the fight, where the question was about Holyfield's stamina based on previous instances, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The question was, is Holyfield getting tired or is Mike Tyson getting tired? And the late fight doctor, Freddie Pacheco, who was a fight doctor for the late Muhammad Ali, said it, that Mike Tyson has had 4-0 fights, and he is not ready to fight hard for 12 rounds. Folks, that was true, because when Mike Tyson was released out of prison, the guys he fought was Peter McNeely. That only went 1 round. A fat Buster Mathis Jr. That went 3 rounds. Frank Bruno to win the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. And by the way, the same Frank Bruno who we knocked out in 1989. So Frank Bruno was not a top flight competitor. And he beat Bruce Seldon to win the WBA heavyweight championship of the world, the title that was on the line in this particular fight. So yes, Freddie Pacheco was correct. Mike Tyson had 4-0 fights. Pretty much it was a nice way of saying he fought bums, because Bruce Seldon only lasted a round and clearly was scared of Mike Tyson, was hit with 1 punch, went down, all of a sudden he's staggering, he can't move, and that was the end of that. So again, fighting one Peter McNeely, 1 round. Buster Mathis, 3 rounds. Frank Bruno, 3 rounds. And Bruce Seldon, 1 round. So yes, Freddie Pacheco was correct that he was not ready to fight hard for 12 rounds, and that you're getting the bad news of what would happen if he stepped up and faced tough competition and Mike wasn't looking good. And as the rounds were on, it was favoring Holyfield big time, where you thought Mike needed a knockout to even win the fight. We're going to fast forward to the 10th round. With the 10th round, with about 30 seconds, I'm going to say about 21 or 22 seconds left, you see, as the announce team is thinking that Holyfield is starting to tire a little bit, he unloads a 1-2, and the right hand just hits Mike kind of on the side, top of the head, and you see Mike's neck snap, and you see Mike in trouble. So now at this point, Holyfield is just busting it loose on it, just unloading with the kitchen sink. Then you see, as Mike is tired, he lets go of a lazy jab. You can tell he's trying to set up a 1-2. He lets go of a lazy jab, and Holyfield counters with a beautiful right hand. I'm talking about right on the point of Mike Tyson's chin. And you see Mike staggering to the ropes, and it's just target practice. And you can make an argument the referee, Mitch Halpern, would not have been wrong in stopping the fight in that instance in the 10th round, because Mike Tyson was out on his feet. He was not defending himself intelligently, and he was just getting beat from pillar to post. but luckily, as he staggered back to the ropes, it was about 10 seconds left. So, of course, the champion gets the benefit of the doubt. But you can see in the corner how tired Mike Tyson is. You can see in the corner how out of it he is. The corner's trying to work on him, and it was nothing he could do. As Holyfield comes out in the 11th round, just unloads everything on Mike Tyson, and Mitch Halpern with a TKO stops the fight, and it was the right stoppage because it's the late Mitch Halpern who was criticized for not stopping another fight in which a fighter ended up dying 2 weeks later. So I'm sure that was in the back of his mind, even though he was never blamed for that. But of course, he faced some criticism, so I'm sure that was probably in the back of his mind. But it was a perfect stoppage because, again, Mike Tyson was not defending himself intelligently. He was getting battered, and of course, the referee's job is to look after the well-being of the fighter, and it was a perfect stoppage. Nothing wrong with that at all, and he would have had every reason to stop the fight in the 10th round. So Evander Holyfield with an upset, and by the way, that MGM Grand became unglued. Folks, if that MGM Grand is not considered a landmark in Las Vegas, they really need to do that, because we talked about Frankie Randall versus Julio Cesar Chavez, George Foreman against Michael Moore, and now Evander Holyfield beating Mike Tyson. And folks, go watch these fights. These places become unglued. So you have Evander Holyfield with a huge upset. Now you're probably asking, with Chin Check, you skipped over why this fight was a huge upset. People forget that fight started off as a 25-1 betting favorite in favor of Mike Tyson. Evander Holyfield was a 25-1 underdog, and by the time they walked into the ring, he was a 6-1 underdog. Now you're probably asking, how did that happen? Before that Tyson fight, Holyfield fought Bobby Chiz in a rather uneventful fight, the actual Showtime commentator. He lost in the rubber match, a TKO in the 8th round, to Riddick Bowe, where Holyfield looked like a shot fighter. If you want to go back even more, had a unanimous decision over Ray Mercer, lost the title to Michael Moore based on a possible heart issue. But the Riddick Bowe fight is a fight that people thought Holyfield was done as a top professional. If you listen to the commentary, George Foreman was going off on ringside saying that they should stop the fight because Holyfield was dealing with some type of medical issue. So people thought, and I'm sure Tyson's camp thought, that Holyfield was going to be an easy fight. That's what we said earlier. When Holyfield walked into the ring, it looked like a lamb was being led to slaughter. Now, what's funny about that is Mike Tyson had just fought in September. So that fight, when he beat Bruce Seldon, which ironically is the same night that Tupac Shakur was shot, when he beat Bruce Seldon, he fought 2 months later and fought Evander Holyfield. So I'm pretty sure Don King and Mike Tyson's team thought that Holyfield was a shot fighter. Holyfield still had a name value, in boxing, because again, this guy was once the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. He regained it, and going into this fight was attempting to be the only fighter besides Muhammad Ali to regain the heavyweight championship of the world 3 times. So there was more of name value with Holyfield than actually what he thought was going to be a competitive fight. Again, this is the same Evander Holyfield who was knocked out by Riddick Bowe, who really fought a rather uneventful fight against one Bobby Chiz, who was actual cruiserweight himself, and Mike Tyson, who just knocked out everybody since he came out of prison. So that's why this fight is a huge, huge upset, because again, the odds were 25-1 initially, because people thought that Holyfield was a shot fighter, and by the time they walked into the ring, it was down to 6-1. Now, when you ask yourself, Chin Check, why did you say this fight tends to get overlooked? A couple of reasons. Because of the legend that Holyfield became, and people's love for Mike Tyson is part of it. The legend that Holyfield became based on this fight, even though to me he was already a legend based on those Riddick Bowe fights. And I always say, if you want to look at Holyfield's best fights to us, look at the Dwight Muhammad Kawi fight, the Riddick Bowe fight, the second fight, and then this fight. And we're still torn as to which fight is his best performance. I know his most famous performance is a knockout versus Mike Tyson. His most tactically sound fight was the Riddick Bowe fight, was obviously the rematch with one Riddick Bowe. Now, this fight is overlooked because, again, there's another Tyson fight, the Buster Douglas fight, that everybody talks about because the odds were 42-1. Buster Douglas was a virtual nobody to shock Mike Tyson versus Holyfield, who, again, at that time had name recognition based on being the heavyweight champion of the world and the undisputed heavyweight champion of that, as well as the guy who beat the man who beat Mike Tyson. So that's why this fight tends to get overlooked, because of people's love for Tyson, one. Number two, what Holyfield became. And number three, the fact that there's another upset of Mike Tyson, that the odds are even stacked on that. But this should take nothing away from what Holyfield accomplished that night, because that fight clearly made him a legend. Even though we were big fans of Holyfield even before the Tyson fight, we were concerned of his well-being going into the fight. Even Steve Albert, the commentator, made a joke that Holyfield had just got married to a doctor who was in pain management, and he said that it's fitting who's fighting a guy in Mike Tyson who's known to inflict pain on his opponents. And the other reason why this fight tends to get overlooked, because of what happened in the rematch with the ear bite incident. So we have people's love for Mike Tyson, what Holyfield ended up becoming, the true legend of the sport, the fact that it was another Tyson upset loss, that the odds are even higher than that, and what happened in the rematch with the ear bite. But this is truly is an all-time upset, because nobody really gave Holyfield a chance, and there was a still segment of people, and people would ask me like years later, what do you think would happen had Tyson and Holyfield fought back in 91? And you know what my answer is? Holyfield would have still beaten him. I think Holyfield, number one, was not afraid of Mike Tyson, and he had a style to beat Mike Tyson, and number three, he can actually take Mike punches. So no matter what year they fought, I think Holyfield would have just had Mike Tyson's number any way slice. It doesn't take anything away from Mike, but sometimes, yes, styles make fights, and I think Holyfield not being afraid of Mike Tyson, being able to withstand Mike Tyson's punch, and having an overall style to beat Mike Tyson. Had they fought on November 18th, 1991, I think Holyfield, he definitely beats Mike Tyson then. He beat him in 96 as a serious underdog, and he beat him again in 97 as he was starting to really dominate that fight, and Mike Tyson really didn't know what to do, but that's a conversation for another day. We definitely hope that you enjoyed this particular episode on Chin Check Radio. Signing out.